Hello and welcome to Phantom Force's Weapons Spotlight, a series where I give a more subdued and informative look on the weapons of Phantom Forces. In this episode, I'll be covering the newly reworked HAMR IAR. The HAMR IAR is a mag-fed LMG unlocked at rank 72. It deals 30 damage up to 80 studs and falls off to 20 damage by 170 studs. It fires at 550 RPM and 725 RPM, and it has a 1.1 times body multiplier and a 1.4 times head multiplier. The muzzle velocity is 2600 studs per second, and the penetration depth is 1.4 studs. Here is a shots to kill table. It has low recoil and it holds 50 rounds in the magazine with 200 rounds in reserve of 5.56 NATO rounds. The reload speed is 3.8 seconds and the empty reload speed is 4.9 seconds. It has a 12.25 walk speed and a 12.75 aim speed. Formerly known as the Scar Hammer, the HAMR IAR is a mag-fed LMG with a very unique and one-of-a-kind mechanic, this being fire rate ramp up. In its resting state, the HAMR IAR fires at 550 RPM, but after firing off a few rounds, it switches to 725 RPM as stated on the stats page. Now, this mechanic sounds pretty cool on paper, but how well does it translate into gameplay? The answer is not very well, and the problem is kind of because of how Phantom Forces play, essentially. PF is an arcade shooter where you run around and get into gunfights on the move. This fire rate ramp up mechanic just doesn't work on a game like this, and especially since the initial fire rate is painfully slow. You will likely lose most head-on 1v1 fights purely because you just don't fire fast enough. And the more damning part about this whole weapon is that at max fire rate, 725 RPM, it's pretty average. The only saving grace for this LMG is that it barely has any recoil, and the damage at range is just excellent, but it still just doesn't save it from the horrible fire rate. From what I can tell though, the HAMR IAR only really works for one very specific situation. This being holding choke points or high traffic areas where you can just hold down the trigger and fire at max fire rate, preferably at range because you're really good at that. Basically, King of the Hill or Hardpoint on indoor maps. It still doesn't perform that well though, even in that situation. Other conventional LMGs can cover this role very well and allow for more flexible aggressive play because they don't have to rely on the ramp up mechanic. Overall, I would unfortunately have to put the HAMR IAR in C tier. The gun is cool, not gonna lie, but it's bad. The 30 round Stanek mag reduces your recoil, reduces your reload speed, and increases your walk speed and aim speed at the cost of reducing your mag size. Okay, where do I even begin with this? So, the main way to maximize the hammer's effectiveness is to fire at max fire rate as long as possible into a high traffic area. This attachment literally cuts that time down almost in half. You get less recoil and more mobility in return, but let's think about this for a second. Your recoil is already really low. You can barely feel the reduction when you put this thing on. The mobility lets you get around the maps faster and find people to engage with faster. But the question is, are you going to win those gunfights with the slow fire rate? Are you sure you're not moving around the map faster so people can kill you faster? To really push out your effectiveness while on the attack with this high mobility mag, you're going to have to pre-fire so you can get max fire rate. And you don't exactly have the mag size to allow that to happen for a very long time. So this is very easily D tier. It's almost a straight downgrade from already pretty mediocre, pretty bad weapon. Now, at this point of the video, you might be wondering when I'm going to talk about the 9mm conversion. Well, if you're one of those people, I hate to break it to you, but the hammer no longer has a 9mm conversion. it got removed. And we're not exactly sure if it's going to be added back, so currently it is what it is. And that concludes this episode of Phantom Force's Weapon Spotlight. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel as it helps a lot. Thank you for watching, and see you next time, and happy holidays.